It began, as most of Tessa's problems now did, with the horse. Specifically, King Brennan Holt's warhorse, Duke, a creature of immense size, majestic bearing, and the disposition of a perpetually disappointed food critic. Tessa had only been able to hear animals for a week, a bizarre side effect of her mate bond with the Alpha King settling into place. Her first clue had been a squirrel outside her window delivering a scathing, 5-minute monologue on the declining quality of local acorns. Her second, and far more consequential clue, was Duke. She and Brennan had been riding through the sunken meadow, a rare moment of peace for the king. Brennan, in an attempt at romance, had been murmuring something poetic about the eternal sky. "The sky is fine," a gruff voice had echoed in Tessa's mind, seemingly coming from the very air around her. "What's not fine is his posture. He's slumping again. Looks like a sack of turnips with a crown." Tessa had almost fallen off her own mare. She'd looked at Brennan, then at Duke, whose ears were flicking with irritation. She hadn't said a word. She'd bitten the inside of her cheek so hard she'd tasted copper, and she'd nodded along with Brennan's poem about the sky, and she'd let the sack of turnips comment settle into the growing catalog of things she could never, ever say out loud. That had been the beginning. Now, a week later, the catalog was enormous, and Tessa's ability to keep a straight face was being tested on a daily basis. She sat at the impossibly long dining table in the Great Hall, trying to look regal and not like a woman who was receiving live, unsolicited feedback from the royal stables via a newly installed psychic hotline in her brain. Brennan, seated at the head of the table, looked every inch the powerful Alpha King. His shoulders were broad, his dark hair was just long enough to look intentionally windswept, and his presence filled the room with a quiet, unshakable authority. His authority would be more unshakable if he didn't pull the left rein like he was trying to start a lawnmower, Duke's voice commented dryly in her head. She had visited him before dinner, a mistake she kept making. And the war cry. Gods, I've heard geese with more intimidating battle calls. Tessa's hand tightened around her water glass. She pressed her lips together. She did not choke. She did not react. She was a queen. She was composed. She was absolutely not thinking about geese. Brennan's wolf, Granite, a loud and enthusiastic presence she could feel thrumming through their bond, surged with contentment. Dinner with mate. The potatoes look excellent. She looks excellent. Everything is excellent. Her own wolf, Willow, offered a calmer counterpoint. The Alpha's pulse is steady. He's relaxed. Rare. Don't ruin this. Tessa took a careful sip of water and did not ruin it. "You're quiet tonight, Tessa," Brennan observed, his hand covering hers on the table. The touch was electric, sending a jolt straight to her core. Granite howled with triumph. "Contact! We have achieved contact! Closer!" His pulse just spiked, Willow noted. Interesting. "Just thinking," Tessa said, which was true. She was thinking about how the king of the 5 territories sounded, according to his own horse, like a waterfowl when he charged into battle. And she was thinking about how she could never, ever tell anyone this, because she loved him, and because she was already the baker's daughter who had somehow ended up in a crown, and adding, "Also, I'm receiving psychic horse transmissions," to her resume would not help. Her core wound of inadequacy, a quiet hum of not enough that had followed her whole life, was now a roaring symphony. She was Tessa, a baker's daughter from the southern border of the territory. She was an established shifter, yes, but her wolf, Willow, was a quiet, practical creature, not the stuff of legends. Now she was mated to the king, living in a castle, and her primary contribution to the monarchy thus far was acting as an unwilling audience for a judgmental horse. "The flowers were a nice thought, I suppose," Duke's voice intruded again, a memory from yesterday's romantic gesture. "If you enjoy weeds. I eat those when the hay is particularly bland." He picked me a snack and gave it to her. Tessa set her fork down very carefully and stared at her plate. She could feel the laugh building in her chest like a physical pressure. Brennan had been so proud of that bouquet of wildflowers. He'd presented them to her with a look of such earnest hope, granite practically vibrating with the need for her approval. She likes the dead plants. Success. We are peak romance practitioners. She had loved them, of course. She'd loved them because he had picked them for her. But now, the image of Duke munching on an identical bunch with a look of mild satisfaction was threatening to crack her composure entirely. She excused herself from dinner early, claiming a headache. She made it to their bedchamber, closed the door, and laughed until her ribs ached. Alone, muffled into a pillow, her entire body shaking with the absurdity of her life. Her defense mechanism was humor, a shield she used to keep the terrifying reality of her new life at bay. If she could frame it all as a grand, absurd comedy, she didn't have to confront the crushing weight of the crown she never asked for. The next morning, Tessa could not sleep. Her mind was a carousel of Duke's commentary, Granite's enthusiasm, and her own creeping certainty that she was the single most unqualified person to have ever worn a crown. So she did what she always did when the world was too much. She baked. The castle kitchens at 4 a.m. were empty, cavernous, and blissfully free of anyone who might bow at her. She found flour, butter, salt. The sourdough starter the head cook kept was decent, not as good as hers back home, but she could work with it. Her hands remembered what her brain kept forgetting. She was good at this. Not adequate, not passable. Good. She was elbow-deep in dough when a voice came from the doorway. "The kitchens are closed, child. What are you—" "Oh." The woman stopped. She was small, white-haired, and carried herself with the particular authority of someone who had been important for so long that the importance had become structural. Elder Margaret, the oldest member of the Pack Council and, by all accounts, the hardest to impress. "Your Majesty," Elder Margaret said, and the title carried approximately the same warmth as a tax assessment. "I couldn't sleep," Tessa said, because there was no point pretending she was here for any regal reason. "I'm making bread." "I can see that." Margaret's eyes, sharp and bird-like, tracked Tessa's hands as she worked the dough. "You have a baker's hands." "I have a baker's everything," Tessa said. "It's the only thing I'm actually qualified for." She hadn't meant to say that. It just came out, the way true things do at 4 a.m, when your defenses are down and your hands are in dough. Margaret said nothing for a long moment. Then she pulled out a chair, sat down at the kitchen work table, and said, "My daughter was a baker, best in the southern villages. She could tell the weather by how her dough behaved." Tessa glanced up. "Sticky means rain." "Sticky means rain," Margaret confirmed, and for the first time, something in her expression shifted. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. One craftsperson acknowledging another. By the time dawn broke, Tessa had produced 3 loaves of sourdough, a tray of honey butter rolls, and a tentative, fragile alliance with the most skeptical elder on the council. Margaret had eaten 2 rolls, pronounced them acceptable, which Tessa had learned from context was the elder's version of a standing ovation, and had, without being asked, explained the real power dynamics of the council. Who listened to whom, who held grudges, who could be moved by reason, and who only responded to displays of strength. It was the first time anyone in the castle had treated Tessa like a person with a brain, rather than a decoration the king had acquired. That evening, she and Brennan were alone in their chambers. He was reading reports, his brow furrowed in concentration, one hand absently rubbing the back of his neck in a way that made him look younger, less like a king. She was curled in the chair by the fire, pretending to read a book about pack etiquette while actually watching him. She should tell him. About Duke. About all of it. He deserved to know what she was hearing, even if it was absurd. Especially because it was absurd. "Brennan?" He looked up, his gray eyes, usually the color of a storm-tossed sea, softening immediately when they found her. "Yes, love?" "Duke thinks you slump." A beat of silence. Brennan blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You're hoarse, Tessa said, drawing her knees up, making herself smaller in the chair. He has opinions about your posture and your rein technique. He says you pull the left one like you're trying to start a lawnmower. Brennan stared at her. The report slid from his fingers, forgotten. You're telling me, he said slowly, that my horse critiques my riding? Constantly, Tessa confirmed. He also thinks your war cry sounds like a goose. The silence stretched. She watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then, she braced herself, a flash of genuine hurt. Not anger, hurt. His wolf, Granite, went very still. A confused, wounded quiet that replaced the usual exuberance. I see, Brennan said. His voice was careful, neutral. How long has this been going on? Since the bond settled. About a week, she swallowed. I'm sorry. I know it sounds insane. I didn't know how to tell you. You've been laughing at me, he said, and it wasn't an accusation. It was worse. It was a discovery. The same quiet devastation she'd seen when his council members questioned his decisions. Only this time, it was coming from her. No, she said, sitting up straight. Brennan, no. I've been laughing at the situation. It's completely absurd. A week ago, my biggest concern was whether my sourdough starter had enough life in it. Now I live in a castle. I'm wearing a dress that costs more than my family's entire bakery, and I have a psychic connection to your horse, who seems to be running a one equine performance review of your entire leadership. It's insane. The laughing is how I'm breathing. It's how I stop myself from screaming. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. The firelight caught the edge of something shifting in his expression, the anger softening into something else. Recognition. You're scared, he said. Not an accusation, a discovery. I'm terrified, she confessed, her voice thick. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know the protocols, the politics. I feel like everyone is just waiting for me to make a mistake, to prove I don't belong here. And this animal thing, it just makes me feel like more of a freak. I'm not enough for this, Brennan. I'm not the queen you deserve. There it was, her deepest wound, laid bare in the privacy of their chambers, with no audience, no counsel, no whispering chasm to carry her pain to the kitchens. He crossed the room in 2 long strides. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs gentle against her cheeks. You are not a freak, he said, his voice fierce and low. And you are more than enough. You are everything. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. The scent of pine and winter air, his scent, enveloped her. I don't need a queen who knows protocols, Tessa. I have Elias for that. I need a mate who tells me when I'm being a pompous ass, even if the information comes from my horse. I need you. Willow let out a soft sound of contentment. The alpha acknowledges our worth. The bond is stabilizing. This is acceptable. Granite was a supernova of joy. Forehead touch. This is a level 3 romantic gesture. We are winning. Tessa let out a watery laugh. So you're not mad about the goose comment? A corner of his mouth twitched. I am incandescent with rage about the goose comment. My pride may never recover. I'm considering having Duke transferred to the northern garrison. Let's see how he likes critiquing the posture of glacier bears. She laughed for real this time, a sound of pure relief. He'd probably tell them their roaring technique is derivative. Brennan chuckled, a deep, warm sound that vibrated through her. Probably. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. But Tessa, talk to me. Not just with the jokes. When you're scared, tell me. Let me help. We're in this together. You're not an imposter in my life. You are the center of it. She didn't know, in that quiet, firelit moment, that the whispering chasm ran beneath the stones of their chamber. She didn't know that a servant, carrying linens in the corridor below, had paused at the faint sound of laughter and caught a single, echoing fragment. War cry sounds like a goose. By morning, every cook, guard, and stable hand in Stonecrest knew. By the following evening, it would reach the ears of a spy who had been planted in the castle months before Tessa had ever arrived. The tenuous peace of that week was shattered 3 days later by the arrival of a messenger hawk. Tessa was in the royal gardens, attempting to identify which plants were flowers and which were, according to Duke, equine snacks, when a castle guard, breathless, delivered the scroll to Brennan, who had been patiently explaining the difference between a rose and a thistle. He broke the seal. His face hardened as he read. "What is it?" Tessa asked, her brief sense of horticultural confidence evaporating. "Alistair Vance is coming," Brennan said, his voice tight. "Alpha of the Blackwood Pack. He requests a formal visit to renew our ancient ties of friendship." Elias, who had appeared at Brennan's side with the silent efficiency of a well-trained shadow, snorted. "Alistair Vance has no friends. He has temporary allies and future targets. His pack has been chafing under our treaty for a generation." Brennan nodded, his gaze distant. "He smells weakness. A new mate, a king supposedly distracted. He's not coming to renew friendship. He's coming to test my throne." He shifted into king mode, his posture straightening, his voice taking on the commanding tone that sent shivers down Tessa's spine. "Elias, double the patrols on the perimeter. I want our best guards on the walls. No mistakes. Assemble the council. We'll greet him with all the ceremony he's due and show him the unbreakable strength of the Stonecrest Pack." Elias bowed. "At once, Your Majesty." As he turned to leave, he shot a look at Tessa, a small, almost imperceptible nod of solidarity. He had heard her fear in passing comments, in the way she hovered at the edges of rooms, and in his own weary way, he was telling her he had her back. As Brennan strode toward the castle, already deep in strategy, Tessa felt that familiar cold dread creep back in. This was it, the real thing, not teasing about war cries, but a genuine political threat. An alpha who saw her as a weakness. And what could she do? Offer him a perfect croissant? Translate the insults of his horse? The feeling of inadequacy was a lead weight in her stomach. Willow was on high alert. Threat assessment? High. The visiting alpha is a known aggressor. Our mate's position is challenged. We must be vigilant. Over the next 2 days, the castle transformed. The low-grade chaos of daily life was replaced by a tense, coiled efficiency. Guards polished armor that hadn't been used in years. Banners were hung. The kitchens buzzed with preparations for a feast designed to showcase the pack's wealth and prosperity. Brennan was a whirlwind of activity, moving from meetings with the council to overseeing training drills in the courtyard. He was the king, every inch of him, and the distance between them felt like a physical chasm. Granite had shifted registers entirely. Gone was the exuberant commentary about potatoes and forehead touches. In its place, Western approach unguarded during shift change. 3-minute window. Unacceptable. Clipped. Tactical. The wolf who had been filing romance reports was now running threat assessments. And the shift in Brennan's demeanor, harder, sharper, more distant, made Tessa's chest ache. He would kiss her goodnight, his mind clearly 1,000 miles away. Tessa felt utterly useless. She tried to help, but the servants just bowed and insisted they had it under control. She tried to talk to Brennan, but he was always surrounded by guards or council members. She found herself retreating to the one place she felt some semblance of competence, the stables. Duke was in a foul mood. "The stable boy used the wrong brush on my flank. The wrong brush. It's a matter of bristle integrity. Is there no professionalism left in this kingdom?" "I'll have a word with him," Tessa promised, stroking the warhorse's powerful neck. "See that you do," Duke grumbled. "This place is falling apart. And now this Blackwood Alpha is coming. His reputation precedes him, all flash, no substance. His father's horse was a notorious gossip." Tessa's ears perked up. "Gossip?" "Oh yes," Duke said, his tone turning conspiratorial. "Told my granddam that the Vance family only polishes the front of their armor. The back is all rust and cheap leather, all for show." Mark my words, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Meanwhile, in the main training yard, Elias was attempting to drill a new squad of guards, a process that was testing the limits of his legendary patience. One recruit in particular, a lanky young wolf named Jasper, seemed to be actively at war with the concept of coordination. He had tripped over his own spear twice, accidentally set off the warning bell with his shield, and during a practice charge had somehow managed to run in a perfect circle. "Jasper," Elias bellowed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "The enemy is that way. They are not, to my knowledge, planning a flanking maneuver from behind you." Brennan, observing from the battlements, rubbed the bridge of his nose. Granite's assessment was terse. Liability. Reassigned to supply lines. "He's eager, at least," Brennan said, trying to find a silver lining. Elias looked up at him, his face a mask of profound suffering. "Your Majesty, he is a danger to himself and everyone in a 10-foot radius. He has the spatial awareness of a stunned badger. I fear if Alistair Vance attacks, Jasper is more likely to accidentally neutralize our own defenses than the enemy's." Tessa, in the stables, caught the sound of Elias's complaint drifting through the ever-present whispering chasm. She winced in sympathy for the clumsy recruit. She knew exactly what it felt like to be the one who didn't quite fit, the one everyone saw as a liability. Her heart went out to Jasper, the badger-brained guard who was just trying his best. Duke, unaware of her sympathies, had moved on. "I want it on record that if this Blackwood delegation arrives with substandard horses, I refuse to share stable space. I have standards." "Noted," Tessa said. In the gray hours before Alistair's arrival, Brennan went for a run. Not a human run, the other kind. He shed his clothes at the edge of the tree line beyond the castle walls, and the shift took him in a ripple of bone and sinew and dark fur. One moment, the king. The next, a massive black wolf, sleek and powerful, cutting through the underbrush of the stone-crest forest like a shadow given weight. Tessa watched from the high window of their chambers, Willow stirring restlessly inside her. He runs alone. He shouldn't run alone before a threat. She hesitated. Then she pulled on her boots and slipped out the servants' entrance. Her own shift was quieter than his, always had been. Where Brennan's wolf was a thing of dark power and commanding presence, Willow was smaller, tawny gray, and moved through the forest the way water moves through stone, finding the path of least resistance, making no sound. Tessa let Willow's instincts guide her, the animal part of her mind mapping the forest in scent and sound. Damp earth, pine resin, the distant musk of deer, and over all of it, Brennan's trail, pine and winter air, sharp with adrenaline. She found him at the ridge overlooking the whispering chasm, standing motionless on a granite outcrop. The pre-dawn wind ruffled his fur. He didn't startle when she approached. He would have scented her long before she arrived. They stood together in wolf form, side by side on the ridge, and for a long moment, the world was reduced to wind and breath and the solid warmth of his flank against hers. No words, no crowns, no protocol. Just two wolves watching the sun crack the horizon, and the low, steady certainty of the bond between them. Something that existed below language, below thought, in the part of them that was oldest and simplest. When they shifted back, shivering in the dawn air, Brennan pulled her close and buried his face in her hair. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The day of Alistair Vance's arrival dawned gray and overcast. A nervous energy crackled through the castle. Tessa stood beside Brennan on the dais in the main courtyard, dressed in a deep blue gown that felt like a costume. Her hands were cold, her stomach a knot of anxiety. Brennan's hand rested on the small of her back, a small, grounding point of warmth in the overwhelming formality of the occasion. He looked magnificent, his silver and black Alpha King circlet glinting in the dim light. To the world, he was unbreakable. But she could feel the tension in him, the tight coil of granite in tactical mode. 6 mounted, 4 on foot, 2 wagons. Formation suggests confidence, not caution. Arrogant. A horn blew from the watchtower, sharp and clear. The procession arrived. Alistair Vance was exactly as Duke's gossip had suggested, all flash. He rode a jet-black stallion adorned with silver-chased leather. His own armor was polished to a mirror shine, and he wore a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He dismounted with a flourish, his pack of grim-faced guards fanning out behind him. "King Brennan," Alistair said, his voice smooth as oiled leather. "How good to see you. And this must be your new addition." His eyes swept over Tessa, lingering for a moment too long, a flicker of dismissal in their depths. Brennan's grip on her tightened infinitesimally. "Alpha Alistair, welcome to Stonecrest. This is my mate, Queen Tessa." Tessa forced a polite smile. Willow was bristling. "He smells of ambition and deceit, and cheap oil for his armor." Duke, from his stall at the edge of the courtyard, was already filing his review. "Look at that animal, the black one, Vance's mount. Adequate confirmation, I suppose, if you don't look too closely at the hocks, but that tack is decorative nonsense. No battlefield functionality whatsoever. All beauty, no substance. Rather like the rider." Tessa pressed her lips together. The comedy of Duke's running military assessment of Alistair's horse was, she reflected, the only thing keeping her from vibrating out of her skin with anxiety. As the formal greetings droned on, Duke's tone changed. The gruff amusement vanished, replaced by something sharp and urgent. "Wait. Look at that animal," Duke repeated, but this time it wasn't criticism, it was alarm. "He reeks of shame. The black one. He is carrying something he does not want to carry." Tessa's focus narrowed. She looked past Alistair to his horse. The stallion stood with its head low, its ears pinned back. It shifted its weight nervously, avoiding the eyes of the other horses. "He should be ashamed," Duke continued, his anger a palpable force. "He allows himself to be used for treachery, a disgrace to all who carry riders. There is death in his saddlebags, girl, hidden beneath the false bottom, blades coated in shadow venom, not for ceremony, for assassination." The world went silent. The droning pleasantries, the shuffling of the guards, the wind whistling through the battlements, it all faded away. All she could hear was Duke's warning. Death in his saddlebags, shadow venom, treachery. This was it, her moment. Not a joke, not a witty comeback, a real, tangible threat. Her strange, ridiculous ability was suddenly the kingdom's only warning. But she had to speak up. Now, in front of everyone, she had to interrupt the king and the visiting Alpha based on the word of a horse. She would look like a madwoman. Alistair would use it as proof of her instability, of Brennan's poor choice. Her inadequacy screamed at her to stay silent, to not make a scene, to not prove them all right. Granite, in Brennan's mind, was running continuous threat assessments. 12 hostiles, sightlines poor, too many wagons. If this turns, push mate behind the dais, first priority. Brennan was speaking, gesturing toward the hall for the feast. "We have prepared a welcome for you and your men." Alistair smiled his predatory smile. "I look forward to it." They were going to let him walk right into the castle, with poisoned daggers. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. Willow was a silent, coiled spring of terror inside her. "He will kill our mate. He will kill our mate." "Wait," Tessa said. Her voice was quiet, but in the tense courtyard, it sounded like a shout. Everyone froze. Brennan turned to her, his brow furrowed in confusion. Alistair's eyes narrowed, a flash of annoyance. "Tessa?" Brennan murmured, his voice low. She met his gaze, praying he would see the truth in her eyes. Praying he would remember his promise. "Talk to me. Let me help." "The silent offering," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's our most ancient custom of trust. Before a guest enters the castle for negotiation, they must present their empty scabbards and saddlebags for inspection." Alistair let out a short, sharp laugh. "My dear Queen, this is a friendly visit, not a treaty negotiation. Surely such rustic formalities are unnecessary between allies. It is a sign of respect for our traditions, Tessa insisted, her gaze unwavering. She was looking at Alistair, but her words were for Brennan. Trust me. Brennan's eyes searched hers for a long, agonizing moment. She saw the conflict in him, the king who couldn't show weakness, the mate who saw the genuine fear in her face. Granite was razor sharp. She sees something we don't. Listen to her. She has not been wrong. And then he made his choice. He turned from Alistair, giving Tessa his full attention, a public declaration of solidarity that stunned the courtyard into silence. My queen is right, Brennan said, his voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument. Our traditions are the bedrock of this pack. We would be poor hosts to neglect them. He turned back to a stunned Alistair. Your saddlebags, Alpha Vance, if you would. Alistair's face was a mask of fury. He was caught. To refuse was to admit guilt. To accept was to be exposed. For a moment, Tessa thought he might challenge Brennan then and there. But with a tight, vicious smile, he gestured to one of his guards. As the queen wishes. The guard, with clear reluctance, unbuckled the ornate saddlebags from the nervous black stallion. He brought them forward and, under Brennan's watchful eye, opened the main flap. It was empty. A collective sigh of relief seemed to whisper through the Stonecrest guards. Alistair's smile widened. Satisfied, Your Majesty? He purred, looking at Tessa. Tessa's heart sank. Had she been wrong? Had Duke been mistaken? She felt a fool. But then she remembered the horse's shame, Duke's certainty. The bottom, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Check the bottom. Elias stepped forward. Before Alistair could protest, he ran a hand along the inside of the bag. His fingers found a slight ridge. With a deft motion, he pulled, and a hidden panel of leather came away. There, nestled in dark velvet, lay 6 slender daggers, their blades coated in a viscous, black substance that seemed to drink the light. Shadow venom. A poison so potent it could kill an alpha in seconds. The silence that followed was heavier, deadlier than any before. Alistair Vance's mask of civility finally dropped, revealing the snarling predator beneath. He had been exposed. By her. The baker's daughter. The king's weakness. Duke, from his stall, observed the proceedings with grim satisfaction. I told you. All flash, no substance. His horse is mortified, incidentally. Absolutely mortified. As well he should be. Brennan didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The power rolling off him was a physical force, a crushing wave of pure alpha dominance. Treason, he said, the word a death sentence. Seize them. The Stonecrest guards moved as one, a wave of gray and silver steel. Alistair's men, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, were disarmed in seconds. Alistair himself didn't resist. He simply stared at Tessa, his eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was chilling. He hadn't been beaten by the king. He'd been beaten by a whisper from a horse, and he would never, ever forgive her for it. Later, in the quiet of the king's solar, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving Tessa shaky and cold. Alistair and his men were locked in the deepest cells beneath the castle, the threat neutralized for now. Brennan poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his hands steady, but Tessa could feel the tremor of reaction running through their bond. He handed her a glass. Drink, he said softly. Your hands are like ice. She took it, the warmth of the crystal a small comfort. For a second, I thought I was wrong, that I'd made a fool of myself, of you. Never, Brennan said, his voice fierce. He sat beside her on the plush sofa, his presence a solid wall of warmth. You were magnificent. You were brave. You saved my life, Tessa. Granite was a thrumming chorus of adoration. Mate is a warrior, a genius. She saw the danger. She protected us. We must reward her with shiny things. And meat. All the meat. The familiar exuberance was back, and its return, after days of clipped tactical assessments, made Tessa's eyes sting unexpectedly. She managed a weak smile. Duke saved your life. I just listened. You trusted yourself, and you trusted me to listen, he corrected gently. He took her free hand, his large, warm fingers wrapping around hers. That is more than I could have asked for. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the scent of him, the solid feel of him, chasing away the last of her fear. I was so scared. I know. He pressed a kiss to her hair. So was I. Brennan had not executed Alistair. To kill a rival alpha, even one caught in an act of treason, without a formal trial, was to invite chaos. The law was the law, even for a king. A formal dinner was held that evening, a bizarre charade of civility where Alistair, stripped of his weapons and flanked by 4 of Brennan's largest guards, was seated at the far end of the table. The intent was to show the pack that justice would be served, but calmly and by their own laws. Alistair, however, had other plans. He had not come to fight with blades alone. Halfway through the meal, he rose to his feet. The clatter of cutlery ceased. Every eye in the great hall turned to him. King Brennan, Alistair began, his voice ringing with false sincerity. I have been grievously misjudged. Those daggers were not for you. They were a gift, a rare artifact for your armory. But your new queen, in her ignorance, has spun a tale of treason. Brennan's face was stone. Sit down, Vance. You are a prisoner here. You have no voice. Oh, but I do, Alistair said, turning his venomous gaze on Tessa. I have the voice of truth. I ask you all, members of the Stonecrest Pack, have you not wondered about your new queen? She appears from nowhere, a simple girl, and suddenly she is mated to your king. And stranger still, she claims to hear things. Secrets whispered on the wind. She claims a horse told her of my plot. He spat the word. A horse. A murmur went through the council members. He was playing on their deepest superstitions. Wolf shifters were natural, a part of their world. But this was something else. I'll tell you what she is. Alistair's voice dropped to a conspiratorial hiss. She is a witch, a manipulator of minds. She did not hear my horse. She planted the thought herself. She created this entire incident to make herself a hero, to solidify her place on the throne she clearly does not deserve. She is a curse upon this pack, and her dark magic will be your undoing. Every word was a hammer blow against Tessa's already fragile composure. Witch. Curse. Dark magic. He was twisting her strange gift into something ugly and terrifying. He was voicing her own deepest, darkest fear, that there was something fundamentally wrong with her. Duke, audible even through the stone walls, was incandescent. The audacity of this man. His horse is refusing oats in solidarity with his own shame, and this preening fraud has the gall to question the only person in this castle with functional intelligence. I want a formal protest lodged. Is there a form for that? Despite everything, the fear, the accusation, the cold certainty that her life was crumbling, the image of Duke demanding bureaucratic redress nearly cracked her composure. The pack elders were looking at her, not with accusation, but with a dawning, fearful uncertainty. All except Elder Margaret, who sat with her arms crossed, her expression one of profound skepticism, directed not at Tessa, but at Alistair. That is enough, Brennan roared, rising to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. The full force of his alpha power slammed into the room, making the very air tremble. You will not speak of my queen that way. You will be silent, or I will silence you permanently. But the damage was done. Alistair smiled, a thin, triumphant slash in his face. He had found Brennan's true weakness, his love for her. Tessa stood up, her legs unsteady. Excuse me, she whispered. She turned and left the great hall, walking steadily, chin level, until she was around the corner and out of sight. Then she ran. Brennan found her on the high battlements overlooking the Whispering Chasm. The wind was a mournful howl, whipping her hair around her face and chilling her to the bone. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't folding in on herself. She was furious. Tessa. She whirled to face him, and whatever he'd been expecting, tears, the old fear, the please let me go speech, it wasn't what he found. He used me, she said, and her voice was shaking, but not with sadness, with rage. That snake sat at our table and used me as a weapon against you, and the worst part, Brennan, is that I handed him the ammunition. I'm the one who's strange. I'm the one who hears horses. I'm the one who showed up out of nowhere with no credentials and no family name and nothing to recommend me except... She broke off, pacing, her fists clenched. I'm so angry at myself. I should be better at this by now. I should be able to stand in that hall and not let a man like that make me doubt every single thing about my own life. This was different. The fireside confession had been fear, raw, exposed, the wound itself. This was what the wound looked like when it caught fire. She wasn't running. She was raging against the part of herself that wanted to. Brennan watched her pace, and something in his expression shifted. He didn't move to comfort her. He didn't tell her it was okay. He waited. You know what makes me angriest? She said, stopping. He called me a witch, and I almost believed him. For 1 second, I thought, maybe he's right. Maybe this ability is wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. And I hate that I gave him that second. 1 second is nothing, Brennan said quietly. I give myself that second every morning when I put on the crown. She looked at him, really looked. The king of the 5 territories, standing on a cold battlement, admitting that he doubted himself every single day. I don't want to be the thing they use against you, she said, her voice finally cracking. Then don't let them, he said simply. Not by leaving, not by hiding. By standing in that hall tomorrow and being exactly who you are. They called you a witch. Fine. Be the witch who saved my life. Be the witch who heard the truth when no one else could. Be the witch who bakes bread at 4 a.m. and befriends my most difficult elder. Tessa blinked. You know about Margaret? She told me your sourdough was not terrible. From Margaret, that's a marriage proposal. A ghost of a smile. You have more allies than you think, Tessa. You just built them your way instead of mine. She felt something loosen in her chest. Not the wound, that was still there, still tender. But the anger had burned away the self-pity, and what was left underneath felt different, harder, more like resolve. I love you, she said. It wasn't accidental this time. It was deliberate. His eyes widened slightly. The first time, it had slipped out unnoticed. This time, she was looking right at him. Granite, who had been in tactical mode for days, finally broke. She said it again, on purpose. This is not a drill. This is level 5. What is above level 5? There is nothing above level 5. Brennan crossed the distance between them and kissed her. And it was not a gentle, comforting kiss. It was fierce and desperate, and tasted like wind and stone and the furious refusal to be afraid. The next morning, Elias Thorne appeared in the solar, his face grim. Vance is demanding a trial by combat. He has invoked the old laws. He is challenging you for leadership of the Stonecrest Pack. Brennan's head snapped toward his beta. He's insane. He has no standing. He claims his bloodline has a dormant claim to this territory from centuries ago, Elias explained, his voice heavy with resignation. It's a flimsy pretext, but the law is the law. The elders have confirmed it. The challenge is valid. To refuse is to forfeit the throne. Tessa's blood ran cold. Alistair had been cornered, and cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Brennan would have to fight for his life, for his crown. Granite had already shifted to battle mode. Combat protocols, review terrain. Weight advantage, ours. Speed advantage, his. Venom, status unknown, verify they've seized all of it, not just the saddlebags. Check his boots, his belt, his rings. Can he use weapons? Tessa asked. Elias raised an eyebrow, surprised by the practical question. Traditional long-bladed knives only. No wolf form, no armor. And he's been in a cell for a day, Tessa said. Badly fed, badly rested. While Brennan ran a ridge at dawn yesterday and has been eating my bread all week. Brennan looked at her. A small, startled smile. Are you strategizing? I'm assessing, she said. Willow's good at threat assessment, and I've spent a week listening to Duke rank every creature he's ever met by combat readiness. Some of it stuck. The entire pack gathered in the great training yard as dawn broke. The air was thick with tension. A circle had been cleared, and in its center stood Brennan and Alistair, both stripped to the waist, armed with only a traditional long-bladed knife. This was not a battle of armies. It was a battle of alphas, ancient and brutal. Tessa stood with Elias near the edge of the circle, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. Elder Margaret had positioned herself at Tessa's other side, a small, deliberate gesture that did not go unnoticed by the rest of the council. Duke, from his vantage point at the stable entrance, was providing unsolicited pre-fight analysis. Vance's stance is wrong. Weight too far forward. He's fast, but he'll overcommit on the lunge. If His Majesty can stay patient, and that is a significant if, given his tendency to lead with emotion, he should be able to exploit the overextension on the third or fourth exchange. Tessa filed it away. Granite had gone quiet, not silent, quiet. The difference was important. The tactical assessments had stopped. In their place was something deeper, older, the animal awareness of a wolf who knows the fight is real and that words are no longer useful. She could feel it through the bond, a low, thrumming readiness, like the tension in a drawn bow. The fight began. It was a whirlwind of motion, two powerful shifters moving with a speed and grace that was terrifying to behold. Brennan was stronger, but Alistair was faster, more slippery. He dodged and weaved, landing shallow cuts, trying to wear Brennan down. "You're slow, Holt," Alistair snarled, ducking under a wide slash. "Distracted. Your little witch has made you soft." Brennan didn't answer. Duke, however, did. "Oh, please. His footwork is adequate. It's Vance who's sloppy. Did you see that transition?" Telegraphed. A foal could read it. Alistair circled, his eyes glittering with malice. "I wonder, does she whisper to you at night? Does she tell you what the horses say?" He lunged, and Brennan, a half-second too slow, took a deep cut on his arm. He grunted in pain, stumbling back. The crowd gasped. And then Alistair smiled. The worst kind of smile. The kind that meant he was about to use a weapon sharper than any blade. "What's the matter, Holt? Lost your voice? Give us a war cry." His voice dropped, theatrical and cruel. Or is it true, what they whisper in the kitchens, what the servants laugh about when you can't hear them, that the great Alpha King of Stonecrest truly sounds like a goose? The insult landed with devastating force. Not because it was clever, but because Brennan knew exactly where it had come from. A private moment. A private joke between him and Tessa in the safety of their own chambers. Someone had heard. Someone had carried it. And now the man trying to kill him was throwing it in his face like a blade. Brennan faltered. His confidence, already strained, cracked. For a split second he was no longer the king, but the man who feared that even his mate saw through him. He was a fraud, a goose. Granite was silent, completely, utterly silent. The bond felt like a held breath. Alistair saw his chance and lunged, aiming for the heart, and in that moment, something inside Tessa broke. Not her composure, her patience. How dare he? How dare this arrogant, treacherous snake use her own private words, words spoken in love, in trust, in the safety of home, against the man she loved? She stepped forward, past Elias, to the very edge of the combat circle. Her voice, when it came, was not a shout, but a low, clear command that cut through the noise. "You," she said, her eyes locking not on Alistair, but on his black stallion, tied to a post nearby. The horse's head came up, its eyes wide with fear. "Tell me everything." The horse's terror and shame flooded her mind, not in words, but in a torrent of images and feelings. Alistair bribing a border guard, a map of the castle's secret passages, a meeting with a disgruntled elder from Brennan's own council, a plan to poison the Wells after he took the throne, a lifetime of treachery, arrogance, and cruelty. Tessa turned her gaze back to the fight. Brennan was on the defensive, his arm bleeding freely, Alistair pressing his advantage. "He paid off your Western Border Patrol, Brennan." Tessa's voice rang out, clear and strong. "He met with Elder Maeve 2 moons ago. He promised her the beta position if she'd support his claim. He planned to poison the Wells once he had the throne." The crowd erupted. Elder Maeve shrank back, her face a picture of guilt. Elder Margaret turned to look at Maeve with an expression that could have curdled milk at 50 paces. Alistair froze, his head whipping around to stare at Tessa, his eyes wide with disbelief. How could she possibly know that? In that moment of hesitation, something surged through the bond. Not Granite's usual exuberance, something older, deeper, the silence breaking like a dam. One word, in a voice she'd never heard from the wolf before. Not shouted, whispered. "Now." Brennan's head came up. He saw his mate, standing tall and fierce, defending him not with a sword, but with her unique, incredible gift. She wasn't his weakness. She was his secret weapon. She was his queen, and he loved her. A renewed strength surged through him. He looked at Alistair, at the man who had threatened his mate and his pack, and all his doubt vanished, replaced by the cold fury of a king. He threw his head back and let out a war cry. It was raw, guttural, and yes, maybe it was a little bit like a goose, but it was the sound of an alpha protecting what was his. And to Tessa, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. He surged forward, no longer fighting defensively, but with the full, overwhelming power of an alpha who had stopped doubting himself. Duke's analysis proved prophetic. Alistair overcommitted on his third exchange, lunging too far forward, and Brennan was there. He disarmed Alistair with a brutal twist, the knife clattering to the stones. He slammed Alistair to the ground, his own blade pressed against the traitor's throat. The yard was silent, save for the ragged sound of Brennan's breathing. He was the victor. He was the king. He looked up, his gaze finding Tessa's across the circle. Granite finally spoke. Not a shout, not tactical. Just her. Always her. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Faced with Tessa's revelations, Elder Maeve confessed her treason. Alistair Vance, utterly defeated and exposed, was exiled, cast out by his own men who refused to follow a leader so thoroughly dishonored. His black stallion, Tessa noted with some satisfaction, was given to a kindly farmer who specialized in rehabilitating traumatized animals. The horse's relief was a palpable wave she could feel even from the castle walls. Duke approved. A dignified retirement, more than the rider deserved. I hope the farmer uses the correct brush. The clumsy guard, Jasper, was hailed as an unlikely hero. In his bumbling efforts to secure the dungeons, he had tripped and fallen against a section of wall, which had swung open to reveal a secret passage. In that passage, he had found Elder Maeve's co-conspirator, hiding and waiting for Alistair's victory. Jasper was promoted to corporal, a position that mostly involved standing still in places where he couldn't knock anything over. Elias Thorne declared it a miracle. Granite's assessment was more measured. Reclassify from liability to unconventional asset. Keep away from the warning bell. And Duke, the architect of their victory, was rewarded with an entire barrel of the finest oats imported from the Sunstone Valley. Tessa stood with Brennan as the stablemaster presented the offering. The great warhorse inspected the barrel, took a large mouthful, and chewed thoughtfully for a very long time. Finally, he swallowed. Adequate, was his pronouncement in Tessa's mind. Tessa turned to Brennan, her face completely serious. That is the highest praise he has ever given anyone. You should be proud. Brennan looked from the horse to his mate, a slow smile spreading across his face. I am, he said, but he wasn't looking at the oats. He was looking at her. Later they walked along the battlements where she had once raged against her own self-doubt. The kingdom was safe, their bond was solid, and the future, for the first time, felt bright instead of terrifying. The inadequacy was still a whisper in her soul, but now it was drowned out by the steady, reassuring drumbeat of Brennan's love, and, she was beginning to admit, by a quiet, growing confidence of her own. Elder Margaret had caught her in the corridor after the trial and said, "Your bread is still not terrible. Make more." Which, from Margaret, was practically a knighthood. The evening air was cool and still. Below them, a pair of wolves from the night patrol loped along the tree line, casual, unhurried, a routine shift change that would have been invisible to her a month ago. Willow tracked them with quiet interest. Eastern perimeter, calm, no threats. The animal part of her mind cataloging, always cataloging, and she let it. It was who she was. They passed the training yard, empty now in the twilight. Brennan stopped, a mischievous glint in his eye. So, he said, the war cry. It's really that bad? Tessa smiled. It's my favorite sound in the world, she said honestly. But is it goose-like? He pressed, a teasing light in his eyes. Maybe a little, she admitted. A very powerful, majestic, kingly sort of goose. He laughed, a full, uninhibited sound of joy that echoed in the evening air. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace warm and strong. I love you, Tessa, my weird, wonderful, horse-whispering queen. I love you too, my big, powerful, goose-honking king, she whispered back, pressing a kiss to his chest. Granite was beside himself. She loves the goose honk! We are invincible! Willow was a quiet, steady warmth inside her. The bond is complete, all threats neutralized. Home has been secured. He was right. She was weird. Her life was chaos, but as she stood there, wrapped in the arms of her mate, she knew she was finally, truly, home. And no amount of judgmental commentary from a horse could ever change that.